Hello and welcome to this episode of the Parents in PR podcast, a mini-series within Sparks by the PRCA. I'm Alex Stevens, founder of Parents in PR and business director at Reuben, Sinclair, and today I'm joined by Lee Beattie. Lee is the joint CEO of creative agency John Doe Group, a 60-person agency with offices in London, Glasgow and Manchester, and clients including Guinness, Sports Direct and Worldwide Cancer Research. Lee is responsible for the people and culture of the agency, as well as heading up the client services. She is one of Adweek's 2022 Female Trailblazers and the Marketing Society Star Awards Inspirational Agency Leader of the Year. Alongside her impressive professional career, Lee is a mother to Edith, who is 7, and Pip, who is nearly 2, and they, along with her wife, live in Brighton. Lee, thank you so much for joining me. Running an impressive and successful agency and achieving so much alongside raising 2 young children is amazing. It's impressive. I'd love to start by talking to you about your experience of becoming a mother while working in the PR industry. What was becoming a working parent like for you?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Lovely to be here. It's interesting because so I started my agency with my business partner, Pam, who I'd worked with previously at another agency for 10 years, so very much my work wife. And when we started our agency, Pam had just had a baby. So on the day that we conceived the agency, Molly, who is now 15 years old, was in the pram beside us, and actually in the very early days often really present. So it was interesting actually growing through the agency with Pam already being a mother, and I didn't become a mum until 7 years ago. So I think what was interesting there is I thought I knew what it was like for her because I was in it, and and she still says to this day that I was really good and I worked with her, etc. However, I know now that I've experienced it all firsthand that I'm constantly saying to her, my God, I had no idea that you were going through these things. And there's lots of things that I look back and I think were sort of a little bit flippant back from me when she would say first day at school and they cried, and I would be like, oh, they'll be fine. But not really feeling what that actually feels like. So it's interesting. So every stage I go through, I'm now saying to her, oh gosh, when you went through this, these things, I had no idea that it felt like this. So yeah, it's certainly been interesting. I'm in a completely different stage of the business than Pam was when she became mum. But honestly, the really big thing that I think I just had no idea about was just how firstly incredibly tired you are when you first come back. Like
I can
nothing.
completely agree.
And honestly, I have to tell you, I've worked so many festivals, and anyone that works at festivals and does festival PR and stays on site and does all that thing is really exhausting. And honestly, in my head, just before it became parents, I was like, I've done all these festivals. I know what I've got to expect, like insane comparison, because it is just nowhere near.
It
So
doesn't
the
compare.
tiredness level, I think at first is really like, wow, like quite shocking, to be quite honest. And then from that point on, just the continuous juggle, and this is not new what I'm saying, anyone listening to this would be like, well, yeah, of course, but that continuous juggle at every stage of your child's life, which changes as they grow. Pam still talks about the juggle now that the kids are, she's got 2, one that's 15 and one that's 13. So even then, at every point, it's a slightly
It's just something a
different
bit new.
adaptation. Exactly, something new. So those definitely have been the biggest things and the ongoing things, and honestly, just trying to navigate you feeling like you are doing a good enough job at work and holding space for everything that you've got to do, and then also doing a good enough job at home and holding space for your kids, and somewhere in between there trying to do that for you. Like somewhere in between all of that is the thing of it. So it's a process, and it definitely progresses as you go, but it's always a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like it's so important to have somebody with you in an organization who you can kind of look up to or kind of lean on for support that has been there and done that to a certain degree. Because like you say, it's impossible to know until you're in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And our third business partner, again, he has two kids that are similar ages to mine. His son's a bit older than mine. So I do think that's massively helpful that the three of us, from a starting point, which I think is important for then disseminating that down through the agency and the culture. Like we'll always have these discussions at the beginning. So, next week I have to be out by 4 o'clock every day because this thing is happening, and it's just like, cool, it's in the diary, fine, like we all know those things. So that definitely is helpful to feel like you're in partnership with people who understand those things and are on the same page with how
Mm.
you navigate those things too, because I guess that's not always the case, and that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing you're kind of understanding and your experience of transitioning back to work was part of the influence behind John Doe's offering to working parents, because I know you guys have an incredible package that's recently been kind of formalized, and I know it features a babysitting service
Yeah.
and a partnership with a sleep consultant. These are things that you've gone above and beyond most agencies. So I'm curious to understand like why you created that enhanced package in the first place, and what the response has been like internally.
Yeah, I mean, I think really, really interestingly, again, when we first started the agency, one of the drivers for that was we had worked somewhere before, and when Pam became pregnant, and we'd been there for a really long time, it was just a statutory package. And
Mm.
honestly, we not really like thought about it massively before then. And suddenly it was like, oh wow, this doesn't feel quite right to put all of this time in, and actually then just to um be on a statutory package. So even from the very beginning, actually, of starting the agency, like we all part of the sort of founding principles and values was to make sure that we were building an agency that just had sort of inclusivity and equality baked in, like all the way
Mm.
through. And of course that means many things, but really in particular, I think if you don't have a good package and create good space for parents at an agency, that is such a massive driver of women not reaching CEO levels. And it is mainly women. Like obviously, there's been a shift now, which is brilliant that there's so many more men in this conversation, and that is hugely important, but it still is mainly women that fall away. And you can see it so easily when you look at the stats in the PR industry of there being more women in roles at every single level until you hit at the very top levels. And simply,
Glaringly
this is
obvious,
such a
isn't it?
massive,
Yeah,
massive thing that plays in it, because women just hit, you're just looking at coming back and how to do everything together. And so many just either don't come back, or and this is anecdotal from lots of people that I've spoken to about this as
yeah.
well, or just feel like the space is not there for them to thrive um, at home and in the office. I've kind of gone off on a tangent, not
No, no, it's
exactly
good.
answering your question there. So yes, it was really important to us, and we've always had a good package. But it's just recently this has become more and more a thing that people are actually talking about, like
Mm.
podcasts like yours, which is great, and just done a few panels recently, and there's more training courses around these, like brilliant one by Amy at Good Shout, that's all about um people returning to work, which I think is really important, because I think having an enhanced package, you would expect everyone to just have an enhanced parental package now. Um, but I also think sometimes things that are neglected is so um helping people go off on parental leave and know that financially they've got a decent package. But then it's the returnship part that
Mm.
I think still isn't really talked about in the same way, and by all accounts can often be the bit that is really difficult
Yeah.
um, for people. That there's just that, and I would say the first person, so our MD in our North office, Fiona, who is amazing, was my first experience of a team member who went off. Her little girl, Thea, is 6. And so 6 years ago, she went off and she had a good package because we had that, but we just absolutely were not prepared for what it was going to feel like for her to come back. And I absolutely learned so much from that because in my head, I had this thought of, when I go off, I love to hear everyone misses me. Have this thing of like, oh, I want to hear that, that this company was nearly on its knees while I was away, and everyone really needed me. So I kind of went on that, like, I just want her to know, and we did massively miss her. I want her to know how missed she's been, how much we can't wait for her to get back in and get into these things. And she had to say to me about 3 weeks in, you're really like,
This is
this
quite
is so
stressful.
stressful. That's great. But I would also just like to hear that everything is also fine and I don't have all this pressure. And I was like, of course, like so, but just then I thought, God, we've got so much work to do to just understand this and what people need. And so now a lot of it is just about communication and talking to people when they come back about what it is they need and using the keeping in touch parts to really find out where they are because everyone has a
So
really
different.
different experience and you've got no way of knowing how you're going to feel or what's going to be worrying you or any of those things. So just really having like really good dialogue, like first and
Mm,
foremost at that point to find out what is going to be useful. People have a sort of return to work plan, but then that might change. They might think
yeah.
they want to come back and work like this, and then actually it comes and they're like, I need something different. So having those kind of communication levels, I think, is important. And then secondly, the thing that you mentioned that we did introduce also is paying for a sleep consultant
Yeah.
package. Um, which again is really born out of my own experience the second time coming back where my son just did not sleep.
I'm in that
Just
camp.
so he was up. Oh, well, I mean, and just how painful. And I think what is really difficult about that is there is a thing in our industry that is all about really being like tenacious. Like
Mm,
a lot of the core skills that you would say is across like, being tenacious and being resilient and, you know, not that any of those skills are not good, like, and are
they're important. Yeah.
are important. But I think because of that, something like coming back and saying you've actually had 3 hours sleep and you're really tired is just feels like a thing that people are just not talking about
Mm,
properly. And actually the effects of that are actually can be really incredibly serious.
yeah.
It's like a mental health problem. Like how
There's a
are you
reason that sleep
people?
deprivation is a
Yes,
form of torture, right?
exactly. It's a real thing. And I remember being picking up my daughter from school and saying to a few people, oh gosh, like Pip just doesn't sleep. Like he's up, I think we had 3 hours sleep last night, and then pointed at other 3-year-olds on about going, they still don't sleep. And I just thought, no,
Oh,
like absolutely not. Like
can't do
I
this for
cannot
another 3 years.
another, yeah, I don't have 3 years in me as it is. I'm in meetings thinking, not actually sure that I can really like I'm in the mindset to make these decisions, and people are looking at you to do that. So we got a sleep consultant. It was incredible, like
Mm,
incredible experience. Really, within a couple of months, my son went from being up almost, every hour, 2 hours to sleeping from 7 till 6,
oh,
like
wow.
every night, which is extraordinary and just felt like some sort of magic. And that has continued. He's nearly 2 now, and you know, he gets up at 5 now. I could still do with 1 extra hour, but honestly, comparatively.
Pick your
And I just,
battles.
yeah, exactly. And so I just thought I cannot, in good conscience, also hear from people coming back into the office and saying that they've had 3 hours sleep, and me then saying, "Great, can you
Great.
go out and meet the client? Yeah, and can you push on that budget? And can you like how is that possible
It's so
to do
true.
that without completely breaking people? So that is one offering that we have. And then yes, you mentioned like we also offer babysitting, pay for babysitting twice a year. And we also extended that to dog sitters because
Ah, good
obviously not
idea.
everyone is, is going to want to have children or does have children, uh, and as a dog lover and owner, also quite difficult to to navigate a proper night out. Also with so um and also, and then I think the other thing is just this sort of open calendar policy and having this policy of saying to people, pick up your kids, like whenever, don't miss like appointments that are important, don't miss sports days, don't miss plays, don't miss, you'll absolutely not look back and remember which meeting it was that you were in, but you will absolutely remember that you weren't in that
Nativity.
concert.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just any of that stuff. So just put that in, put it in the
Mm.
calendar, you make sure everyone can see it. If you've got specific things of, I got to be away, my daughter's swimming on a Monday, so I must be like finished at 4:30 on the Monday to navigate those and drop off. So have that in the diary and make it loud, like across the
Mm.
board. Otherwise, feels like this hidden thing that people got to hide, and they feel,
Yeah,
and it's also just not a good example then to younger team members coming
okay.
through and looking at how they might navigate their lives, and is this a good company for them to be in as they go through all these different life stages.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, I think that is a really big thing. And I'm also under no illusion that sometimes parents in our offices will then look back on at 8 o'clock to finish some things. So it's not like it's perfect. Like I'm not, none of this is absolutely perfect. I know that that
Parenting, it never is it? So
yeah, exactly. But just trying to at least have that thing of, um, we just trust everyone to just
yeah.
do what they have to do.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because you can have all the policies in the world in place, but actually it's a cultural thing, isn't it? It's
Yes,
having the kind of trust and belief that in your team and for them to have that right back at you, trusting that that you are okay with them doing these things and it's not going to
definitely.
be perceived in a negative way for their career progression and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And our experience is that clients are in the same situation, and also even in, in big blue chip clients, huge companies also have shifted their policies and the way that these things work for them. So we have also found that navigating these things with clients and being able to say, oh, actually, such and such don't work a Friday, or they finish at 4 that day, they are like, oh, actually, same for me on a
Yeah,
Wednesday. So it's like we're all
it's just
just
being
human
human.
beings. They have the
Mm.
same lives and the same, and it's, but I do think that's quite new, and I mean really new, like last year, talking about these things even properly with clients, and it having been extremely positive as well.
Absolutely. I guess if your work is not affected, they don't really mind how you are as long as you're doing the work,
Yeah,
which you clearly are. So yeah. Um,
exactly.
I read on the PR Week Power book in which you're featured that one of your goals this year was to set more boundaries for family time, which is such an important point, but really,
Yeah,
really tricky to do.
yeah.
How have you been going about doing that while still sort of maintaining your kind of work life as well?
I mean, again, I'll only ever be entirely honest. It's difficult. I don't feel like I've got like a brilliant like set of boundaries all the time. However, like I am intentional about trying to do certain things. And so there are certain things that I am quite rigid on, which is, for example, that Monday that I just mentioned,
Yeah.
swimming is at that time, and it's just going to happen, and that is in the diary, and I absolutely do that. Also, the days that I work in London, I am pretty steadfast on that I get the 4:29 train back, because if I do that I can get back in time, have dinner with the kids and my wife, and then I will do a bit of work like later, like once
Sure.
they've gone to bed, they'll finish this, and that works really well, and everyone knows that that happens now, and um it just goes on. So I'd say those are the big ones, because I think it is important to, when you try to do too much or change an entire an entire system is when it starts to feel like you're really like failing in those. But so those particular boundaries I have really managed to make work. And I think that for our team, they have quite similar. Anyone that's a parent has some similar things like that, and they have it in the diary of like this is the day that this thing happens. I definitely do pick up in these days, and it just doesn't change. And even if people forget, because they do, so people will forget and they'll put it in, then I've noticed now, which is great, that people are much more likely on Slack to just go, no, this is the day that I'm picking up.
Yeah. Having the
And
confidence to
then
be able to do
everyone's
it
like,
is
oh
really
yeah, yeah, sorry, I
important.
forgot. And it's yeah, whereas I think people were really embarrassed to do that even a few years ago
Yeah.
because they felt like that real sense of presenteeism. Like if
Yeah.
I'm not here, people are thinking, and I definitely think that's shifting for the better. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think having conversations and being open about that and having role models in an organization that live by that as well, because I think if you've got somebody at the top of an organization that is says they have loads of boundaries but then breaks them all, then you kind of feel as a more junior person that you should also be doing the same. But it's really refreshing to hear people in your position talking openly about, finishing early and being at home for your wife and kids. So I think that's hugely important. um Finally, I just wanted to ask if you have any tips or words of wisdom. I mean, there's been so much that you've said that's actually super useful and super tangible, but any final kind of tips or words of wisdom for people that might be listening to this thinking, Lee has done so well in terms of creating this amazing career and being a mum of two. How am I ever going to achieve that? That person's probably me, by the way. I'm listening to it thinking that. But what would you say?
What did I say? So I think there's two things. I think if you work somewhere and you're about to navigate this, is um making sure that you, I guess, already know what the policies and stuff are there, but don't leave it at that. Like set up a conversation with however it works in your organization, whether it's
Mhm.
a line manager or someone that you just really know that you can talk to, or HR, to really navigate that conversation, thinking about what it is that you need. Because I think this is the thing that people are afraid to do sometimes, is have the conversation, talk about what like your needs are, the things that you might be worried about, ask for policies that are not there, and just make sure that you've really got everything to hand there. And I say this with obviously understanding that maybe not everyone's organizations or not everyone feels like as safe as all that, and it might be trickier, but where possible, I do think just really understanding um what is in place, and feeling like you can be open and honest about the things that you need. And then I think on the other side, if you are in a position of running a company, is also listening to what people need and asking them that, and trying to help them navigate it like a human being,
Mm.
and not just through the things that are written in a policy, because those are super important, and it is important that policy is there for fairness and everyone understanding boundaries around it. But there needs to be sort of flex and nuance um, in terms of just that everyone is slightly different, and their experience, particularly when it comes to having children, is likely to be pretty different as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know if that is handling things. And then I guess the last thing is right is trying to throw off that thing of worrying that people will somehow feel that you are not doing enough.
Mm.
Or I think this is a thing, particularly for women who are juggling work and family, this hear it all the time, this constant thing of just feeling like you're not doing um either thing well enough, but it's sometimes because you're worried that other people will be thinking that, and that is a thing that can really like drive anxiety.
Yeah,
So it's like where you can, it's easier said than done, but where you
of
can,
course.
like working on just, just doing the absolute best that you can
You can,
on
yeah.
each of these things, and knowing that is that is all that you can really do.
Yeah, makes total sense. Lee, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been truly fascinating. It's such an amazing conversation to have with somebody that's done so well at both things. Amazing to talk to you, and thank you for sharing your experience.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
No worries.